Hey, everybody, this is Bob Goodwin, and welcome to another episode of Career Club LinkedIn Live. I am really excited about today's episode when we get to our guests here in just a minute. But first, if you haven't checked out Career Club, please do. You can find us at career.club, where we're using proven sales and marketing tools to help people find a career that matters to them. This is a live event, so as we go, please let us know where you're calling in from. And obviously, use the comment section to ask any questions that you'd like to ask our guests today. This is going to be a very, very fun session, so participation points are going to be awarded. I also want to quickly say thank you to my colleague, Joey Pace, who is the magic that makes this whole thing happen. So without further ado, I would like to welcome our guests onto the call. Let's see if we can make technology be our friend. Almost. Right. There we go. Oh, come on. There we go. Yeah, we did it. So thank you, Joey. But seriously, I'd like to welcome our guests. So these are three of the six authors, collectively known as the Band of Sisters, of the new book that is phenomenal. You should smile more. And so with that, I'd like to introduce Lori Marcus, Katie Lacey, and Cie Nicholson. Ladies, welcome.
Thank you.
Awesome. So as is our habit here on our LinkedIn Lives, just a little bit of an icebreaker. So Katie, I'll pick on you first. So where were you born and raised, and where are you calling in from today?
Well, that's an easy one. I was born in Washington, D.C. and raised in the Virginia suburbs outside of Washington. And I have lived in New York City for the last 26 years.
Oh, my goodness. And just kind of a very brief career arc for you so people can kind of get grounded.
Sure. I went to business school, and coming out of business school, my first job was at PepsiCo, where I spent the most formative years of my career, and part of the reason I'm here today. And then went to ESPN, and from there did a really kind of what you would expect. I went and ran a stationery company.
Where else would you go?
As one does. And then since then, I've been serving on a board and working with the Band of Sisters.
Very, very cool. Cie, welcome.
Thank you.
Okay, born and raised, and where are you today?
Chicago is where I was born and raised. I went to school out in the Midwest, and then I've been in the Northeast since 1997. Actually, Pepsi brought me out to the East Coast. I'm now calling from the Upper West Side in Manhattan. And for my kind of career, I spent 11 years at Pepsi. I was the chief marketing officer when I left, and then I went on to a couple other chief marketing roles. Worked for Equinox in the fitness category. I was in the fintech space and a startup that eventually got bought by Google. And now I'm doing a lot of working with startups and advising, and I'm a couple of board of directors. And then obviously the Band of Sisters.
Very cool. And Lori, welcome.
Hi, everybody. I was born and raised in New Jersey, so I apologize in advance if I say you guys, use guys, or any of that. I live in Southern Connecticut now, although I'm also on the Upper West Side today. Quick career story. So 3 chapters. First chapter, largely at PepsiCo. I was there for 24 years. That's a long time. Second chapter of my career was as a chief marketing officer, more in direct-to-consumer industries, retail, Keurig Green Mountain, and then at Peloton in its early days. And then for about 6 years now, I've been in a portfolio career, and 3 parts to that, serving on corporate boards, doing executive coaching, and then the Band of Sisters is my third pillar.
Oh, very cool. So obviously Pepsi is the theme, and we'll kind of break that down in just a second. Yeah. Now, I skipped over one thing that's always fun. Katie, what do we find you doing when you're not at work and doing Band of Sisters stuff?
I do a lot of walking. Some of it with Cie around Central Park. I play golf, I cook, and I travel.
Very cool. And where's the next spot on your travel list?
Well, Boston, but that doesn't really count. I'm going to Vienna and Prague in the spring.
Now we're talking. That sounds like fun.
Yeah.
Cie, what are you doing when you're not at work?
I'm doing handstands. I'm on a 20-year quest to do handstands all over the world. It started in 2015 when I was 50. I'm 8 years in. I'm going to do them till I'm 70. You can follow me on Instagram. I do them all over. I'm kind of nuts about it. And so really, it's actually probably the only interesting thing about me is my handstands.
Oh, stop. So where the heck did that come from?
When I left kind of corporate America in 2015, I went on a month journey with a friend out west. We went to all these national parks, and we were trying to be entertained to our friends and not just do the same boring picture with our arms around each other saying, we're in Utah, we're in Colorado. So it was all of a sudden I started I did a handstand. I'm like, gosh, I'm surprisingly okay at this. Anyways, and so then I just started doing them everywhere.
If you want to be a brand, do something different, right?
Right. So yeah. So anyway, so I do them everywhere. I just did my holiday one, which I'll be posting shortly. I'm very excited about it. It has some sparkly lights.
I've seen a draft. It's very good.
I know what my next Instagram follow is going to be. Lori?
Exactly. Yeah. If you're going to follow one of us, falsely, don't follow me. Because basically what I do when I'm not working is I'm up at the crack of dawn eating M&Ms and working out on my Peloton bike or running here in Central Park. And when I'm not doing that, when I'm not working, I love to go to Broadway shows. I think I have literally seen everything that there is to see. So that's my
top 3 favorite shows. Top 3 favorite shows.
I'll go. So recently, Hamilton is kind of an obvious one. Love that. We recently saw Chicago again. Hadn't seen that in years, and it never disappoints. And then I'll just do a recent one that I think is excellent. Is Six. It's about the 6 wives of Henry VIII. Super short, hour and a half. Just kind of a big musical. All women in the band. Excellent. So good. I saw it twice. And then Strange Loop. I'll throw that one in as well.
Okay. Bonus one. Awesome. Very cool. So let's dive into this. So for folks who don't know, tell us a little bit about who the Band of Sisters are, and then use that as a segue into the book, You Should Smile More, and why you guys wrote that. So I'll let you guys orchestrate.
I'll start. So obviously, as you can tell by our introductions, we have a big Pepsi overlay. So there's 6 of us, 3 obviously representing 3 of us today. And we, from the late 80s to about 2016, we were at Pepsi. We all overlapped for about a decade. So for a real important part of our career, we were all in C-suite in some capacity. We then went on to run paper companies and we were at NFL, and we're at ESPN, Equinox, BlackRock. So we all had much, other chapters that we're in the middle of right now. A lot of us are now on board. So we kind of went from the bottom run all the way to the boardroom with Pepsi being a very formative part of it. And then we have stayed connected and have been always very supportive of each other. Then we wrote a book that was actually launched in September of this year, which is obviously the one you just held up.
Yeah. So Katie, you want to maybe start off with just a little bit of why you guys decided to write the book?
Yeah. So, we got together, it was in 2019, and it was a little bit of just kind of a reconnect. It was a larger group of women talking about, just kind of where we've been, what we've been doing. And as tends to happen, some stories started to get shared. And, there was a little bit of a feeling of, wow, have things changed? That was one of the first questions. And Lori actually had brought up, she was a founding member of the first Women's Resource Network at Pepsi in 1993, I think it was. And so here it was, almost 30 years later, and we're getting the sense that things had not changed. Sometimes as you move beyond it, you don't realize it as much, but as we started really talking to younger women, obviously close to daughters, nieces, and what they were encountering, we realized that we could not check the box. This was, the work was not done, and that we had something to offer to the conversation. And what we really honed in on was it's these little things. It's these little things that add up day in, day out. And they're the things that happen. They're the micro moments, the microaggressions, whatever you want to call them, that sometimes feel too small, too petty. But then they add up and they create a wall. And so that's where we really wanted to focus, was bringing awareness and attention to those. And we felt like we had a unique perspective given that trajectory. I mean, Cie talked about everywhere we've been. We counted it up. We've been in 29 industries. We've been at every level, and we're not one person with one point of view. We're 6 people with 6 different ways of handling things, 6 lenses on very similar situations and different reactions to them. So we felt like we had we had been there, we were still there, we could talk about it, but we could also, importantly, we could talk very practically about it. And that
we'll talk about that in a minute, Katie, because I think this practicality that you guys take is really, really important. Something that definitely struck me about the book. Lori, if the book is super successful, what changes happen? How would we know?
Yeah. So I think the thing that's interesting, as Katie mentioned, we focus on these micro moments, microaggressions. Some people call them accidental acts of sexism. Whatever you call them doesn't matter. But we hope that we are starting a conversation on this. And then given that we're operating executives by background, what we hope is that we can give really practical advice to women who experience this, to bystanders in the room of any gender, turning bystanders into allies, and then also for bosses of any gender. So what we feel like, and we use storytelling and we use humor and we're super, super practical, is that we can actually get people to be, it's kind of as a marketer, right? Like awareness, trial, repeat, depth of repeat. So we can make people aware that these things are happening, give practical tools for how to make them happen less often. And so what we're hoping that we can do is the answer to these micro moments are these little micro solutions. So literally in every meeting that you were in, if you're aware of it, as a bystander, you can see something and you can say something. As a boss, you can other people less often. And as a woman, when you experience these things, you can then react to them with the right words and actions in the moment. So we're hoping we can actually start a movement of just like one little thing at the time is getting people aware of this and making very small changes that can have very big impact.
Yeah.
Well, one thing that was interesting, I just want to add, is that we obviously ran across all these situations and we had plenty of conversation, but we wanted to figure out if it was still happening today. So we went out and did primary research with hundreds of younger women, and besides looking at the academic research, and anything that we talk about or anything in our book is actually still happening today. And I think one of the really interesting points was that for me was that to see that younger women were actually in some cases felt less equipped to be able to deal with some of the stuff they're going to handle the workplace, because the fact that they thought some of these issues that they didn't think they were going to run into them, or they thought they were solved. Whereas in our generation, when we went through, we had pretty low expectations because our business school classes were all men, and like the people that ran all the groups were men, and the men were all the power positions. And so we just kind of fit in. And I think that younger women today, I mean, you mentioned you have a daughter that's, a recent grad. She went through girl power. They controlled everything. They Title IX, they were getting great grades, going to great schools, graduated at higher rates. They think they have the world by the tail, and they get into the workplace. And some of these same things of like, hey, Susan, will you take the notes, or being overtalked, or, handling more of the housework, or on and on and on. All these things are still happening, but they actually didn't see it coming. We saw it coming. So I thought that was interesting.
Well, so, and it's kind of to the point that it's still happening. Now, one of the things that hopefully is encouraging, but still I think highlights that there's a gap yet, is 41 of the Fortune 500 CEOs are now women. So that's really good. That's, I think it's only 8%, which is not really good, but it's double what it was 6 years ago. So, some progress is being made. It's probably the beauty of a low base, right? You guys are all using numbers. So it's a 100% increase, of a crappy number. So, we're slightly less crappy. But now at the same time, you guys are all on boards. We've talked about that. Yeah. And a statistic that I found says that 35% of board members now are women. But last time I checked, 51% of the population in the U.S. are women. So why is there still this, very significant disparity?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think we could have probably a 7-week conversation about this, right? I mean, so it's a pretty hard one to boil down. I'll tell you, it makes me so frustrated to look at those numbers, because we are not just starting out, right? Like we are decades in the making of women en masse coming into the workforce. So it is, to me, the fact that 41 Fortune 500 women's are CEOs is so unacceptable. It makes me angry. One of the best sources, I think, for the data and some of the drivers out there is the McKinsey study, the annual study they do about women in the workplace. They've been doing it for a long time. And the thing they talk about is this broken rung at manager. And it makes so much sense to me. It's that first job or that first promotion where, young women and young men are coming into the workplace at the same rate. And then, but you get to that first kind of defining managerial position and men are getting promoted at a higher rate. And boy, you multiply that out over the years and the math is pretty obvious. And one of the key things that you learn, and I can look back and we're all wired to think like this. Even as women, we have to deprogram ourselves sometimes, but that idea that men are based on potential and women are promoted based on performance is huge. And it's just so baked in, I think. And it could be like, okay, we're sitting here, you and I both started the company at the same time. And it's like, Bob, whether it's conscious or unconscious, Bob looks like me. Bob, grew up in the same place. He knows my brother. Like, Bob's got presence. I can see where Bob's going. Let's promote Bob. Bob's a fast tracker. Katie seems good. She hit her numbers. She's a good team leader. Let's give her another year of seasoning. And you feel like you're doing Katie a favor because you've acknowledged that she's good. So but that happens day in, day out, and that sets it up. So I think that I can see that scenario happening across the country, across every company. And that adds up to a huge difference. And then you don't have a pool. And part of that then, and then I'll stop, is I think companies focus so much on recruiting, and especially when they look, oh my God, I've got this gap. And so then they're out kind of like everybody's searching for that same small pool of people because only a certain number of women have gotten there. And what we really want to emphasize is the need to focus on retention. You've got them all coming in. They're coming in at 50-50. So why aren't they moving up at the same rate? And I think companies need to spend a lot more time looking at that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Lori?
Yeah, I was just going to add, I guess, 2 points to that. One is it's kind of the opposite of the law of large numbers, right? When you have a smaller number of women, so it's kind of like you're going to hire a consulting company. Nick, nobody ever got fired for hiring, McKinsey or Deloitte, or if you're doing a big search, like no one ever got fired for hiring Spencer Stewart or Egon Zehnder or Korn Ferry to do a big search. It's sort of like, it's okay to, it's a good, safe thing to do. It's sort of like promoting men, like the whole, I mentioned the you guys thing, like he's a great guy sort of thing. Like, it's like, it's not that risky to promote a man. But when people are talking about when there's fewer women, so then you're talking about promoting women of color, people tend to focus more on it. And think about women CEOs that have failed. Everybody talks about that they're women CEOs, right? Remember Marissa Mayer at Yahoo, like nobody talked about just that it was one of many CEOs who happened to not turn around a big media company, right? It was always this woman CEO. So it's the dearth of women in these very senior positions. It sort of feeds upon itself that people feel like they have to have that added level of scrutiny before they promote women. One other thing I was just going to add, you mentioned the boardroom, and we all do sit on corporate boards. There was a study done, I don't remember who did it, but it basically talked about, so a lot of companies are adding one woman to the board, which is like a check the box. We have to have at least one woman on the board. The so-and-so teacher's pension fund won't invest in us if we don't have a woman on the board. So what they say is one woman on the board, just a token. 2 women on the board, women start to sort of feel their power and presence. And it's only really when you have 3 women on the board that women really start to achieve their full potential on the board.
That's interesting.
They have the psychological safety, they feel their voice, they feel supported. And it makes sense based on some of the other things that we've seen. And you say, well, that's crazy. Why would you have 3 women on the board? Well, there's 9 people on a board or 11 people on the board or even 7. It would not be crazy that 3 of them would be women, as you said, representing 51% of the population.
Yeah. See?
No, I think that I've been sit out at board, and I was at one point one of the only female just because of somebody else had dropped off, and now I'm like one of 3. And there is, you do feel it does feel different. I mean, versus just kind of being the only one, because when you're the only one, you definitely feel like, gosh, you don't want everything you say to assume like, oh, she's always going to go down the female path or whatever. So I think I definitely can completely relate to that. And it is interesting. I run the corporate governance committee for the board I'm on. It's a public insurance company. And, there's all these, rules coming down the pike over, with act through NASDAQ and SEC of actually being able to hit at 30, you have 30% of your board. So in some cases, the having 3 is not going to cut it, because there's many boards that actually have, 11, 12, 13 members. So I think that's, very positive. I hate to think that we're mandated to get there, but I think it's a positive.
So Katie, winding it all the way back to one of your earliest comments, it's that what you call it, the broken rung, McKinsey calls it the broken rung. Yeah. It kind of remind me of basically it's compound interest.
Yeah.
Right? The earlier you start. Right?
Exactly.
And so that you're kind of reaping the non-benefits of not investing early enough.
And boy, that translates to salary too, right? You start looking at the wage gap, and if you compound the fact that you're not getting promoted as fast, and you might be getting a slightly lower percentage increase when you do, the math is pretty simple.
Well, the other thing that y'all were making me think about is in the book where we talk about the talent meeting, right? And that bias actually can go across genders. And it's like, well, but Sarah's, just had her second baby, so I'm not really sure, and making all these assumptions.
Yes.
About people's lives and what they want and what they're capable of, and et cetera. And in those, you think about some of those very formative, like there's a lot going on in people's lives.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And decisions being made for them based on bad assumptions.
Yes.
Let me remember the name of the chapter, bad assumptions. And at one point, I just want to make Bob to amplify something that you said. We take the attitude in the book, and I still take it in my life, which is assume positive intent, right? Like, I don't think men are waking up in the morning saying like, I'm going to ask Susan to take the notes, and so I'm going to keep women down in society. I don't think most men are saying like, oh, there's a baby shower, I'll just ask the woman VP to plan the baby shower, and I'll ask the men to be on the M&A task force. I really don't think it's premeditated. I think a lot of it is unconscious. But the point that you just raised is a great one, right? Those key people planning meetings, most times when people say, oh, we'd love to offer, Jane that job, but she just had her second baby and her husband is a big hedge fund in New York, like they'll never move to Chicago. They're actually doing it out of place of caring. I don't think they're doing it to hold women back. But the net result is it does hold women back, because you're making assumptions for people that you should not be making on their behalf.
Exactly.
Women do it too. It's not just men that do it.
Well,
but
that was one of the points that I gleaned too, is in why I said sort of goes across genders.
Yeah.
But again, to your point, it's unintended. It somehow it's natural. It's unintended, but maybe not very helpful.
Yes.
One other point I guess I'd add is we were talking about the broken run theory, that we have a chapter called Be Like Bill, which is, guys kind of come in very confident. They're like, they'll apply for jobs if they fulfill 4 of the 10 requirements. They're like, yeah, I'm going to apply for it. Women would take it as rules. If they don't hit 10 out of 10, they might not apply. And there's data that would show that women apply for like 20% less jobs. And they're like, maybe they don't want to showcase, they don't want to look like they're showing off. So maybe they're not pushing their results as much. I mean, there's all these various things that are built into it. And I can think of times when early in my career, I was excited when I got my first job out of graduate school. I thought I was getting paid a lot of money. And now I compared that to I had been working in a bike shop. So of course anything was going to look right. But at that point, every time I got promoted, I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. Now I'm like, gosh, now I'm bonus eligible. And I was always so thankful. I'm like, oh my God, now I'm an assistant. Now I'm an associate. And I feel like I noticed the male peers were always mad, like, gosh, I'm not getting promoted quickly enough. The raises are too small. And we just had very different attitudes. And I feel like early in my career, had I had a little bit of that, like, would I have moved quicker, because of the fact that when it got to the end of the year and they could only promote one person or only have so much for raises, I'm sure they're like, oh, she's going to be happy regardless of what we give her. Let's have her wait one more year. Bob's going to quit. And so I'm sure that I was absolutely, because I had this very positive attitude, I'm sure it played against me at times, because of the fact that I think they knew I was going to be kind of happy with regardless of what the situation was. I mean, I was treated fairly, but I feel like I could have, I'm sure that played against me.
Tying 2 points that you guys were making. One is, the potential versus performance, dynamic, which that's a new one for me that is super helpful. But I think it ties very into something that we do talk about on this podcast pretty regularly, which is that application rate, where men are like, well, I've only got 60% of it. But intuitively, they're going, well, I've got the potential though.
Yeah.
Right? And women are going, well, I don't have all the performance to tick every box, so I shouldn't apply for this role.
Yeah.
And then it becomes very self-reinforcing, which again is a negative loop, basically.
Yeah. And I think one of the things we need to be a little careful taking out of this, and we tread pretty carefully in that chapter, and in our whole theme of the book, is telling women they need to do things differently. Because part of this is there's women we've been told to lean in a little to perhaps, more than is helpful at times. So part of this is, yes, there are things that you can do as a woman to make sure that you are not being taken advantage of at the workplace. You're accepting, you're too gracious in the acceptance of your raise. But at the same time, I think it's the company-wide, need to recognize that you can't just reward or focus on the one side. So and I don't know if I'm saying it that well, but it can't just be like, okay, women need to act more like men and, kind of apply when they're only 60%. There's probably a middle ground here, right? Like maybe we all apply when we've got 75% of the skills. So there's some blending.
Well, Katie, you kind of bring me to something that I want to talk about. This has all the potential in the world to be a third rail question. So I'll caveat it that way. But do you guys believe that there fundamentally are differences between men and women? And if so, is that a good thing? Or should we be striving for a gender agnostic mindset? Like where should this be going?
I'll jump in first on this.
We're going to let Lori take that third rail.
This is the part. So I mentioned that I do executive coaching. So whenever there's a question that's like a little dicey, all of a sudden, Thelma and Louise get very quiet and they're like, we're going to let Lori.
Come back, Cie.
We're seeing all her turtlenecks. So I have a fairly strong opinion on this, which is, I'll use the example, and this is not what you were saying when people say like, I don't see color. It's like, yes, you do. And that's good. And it's like, so I don't think it's a question of trying to say that we should, not see gender, that I think we should recognize that in general, there are differences. One thing that I would say though is, so a word, or a way that it was described to me years ago. I don't know if you remember the book, Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus. But what it really talks about, it's not really men and women. Like all women have some traditionally feminine process, and then we have some masculine process in it, and men have some masculine process or feminine process. So whatever you call it, process, traits, whatever it is. But I think we each have some of each. And sometimes, I'll use an example, back in the early 90s, there was a syringe crisis at Pepsi. Some consumer stuck a syringe in a can of Pepsi or Diet Pepsi. It was a whole big thing. And the person who was our president at the time, Craig Weatherup, and he handled the situation incredibly, incredibly well. But people talked about there were times during that, it was probably a week or 2 week long situation where he had to use a very masculine kind of process. He had to take control. He was commanding. He went on CNN at the time. This is early 90s. And he was very sort of traditional masculine process, very commanding. He also went to a very feminine part of his process, which was a very nurturing thing when he was with our company, right? So he did a lot of internal meetings, let people know our company was in a little bit of a crisis. He understood, he was caring, he knew people were nervous, and it was a disconcerting time. So he pulled on the different tools in his toolkit, some of which were more masculine process and some of which were more traditionally feminine process. So what I think is we each have a little bit of both, and we have to know that workplaces are the best when you have diversity of style, diversity of background, you have strategists, you have people that are more execution minded, you have people who are into words and pictures and storytelling, and some that are really motivated by, numbers. And you have men, you have women, you have older people, you have younger people, right? You have people that grew up in the Midwest, you have people that are from New York. I mean, you have Jews, you have Christians, you have gay, you have straight. Those are the best workforces when you have diversity. So I am more of the point of view of let's celebrate the differences rather than try and pretend there are no differences. And last thing I would say on that, there are men that you meet that bring much more of like traditional feminine process things to the table, and some women that bring much more sort of masculine process things to the table. And that's okay. That's part of the diversity.
See, Katie, do y'all like that?
Yeah, I would say, I think it's just so hard it's hard when you try and say there's just, all men are one way, all women are one way, right? Because there's so many differences within each. It gets challenging when you ascribe characteristics and traits to each one. That's where it gets complicated, and that's where we still are. So I think that's an effort to move away. I saw this one thing. It's an effort that needs to be done. I read this one thing about, there was a company where there was a woman CEO, and somebody had done a study, and we talk in the book about the importance of language in the workplace and gendered language and things like that. And in this one company, they found with the woman as CEO, the words that were used in reviews, it started to trickle through the organization. They were using more kind of positive leadership types of words that are more often associated with men for women throughout the organization. Mm-hmm. So it's just a really interesting point in that the representation translated into the language, and it started to cross those traditional gender boundaries. So I've kind of I think it's really hard when you get into those kind of like male versus female conversations, because there's so much difference. There's probably more difference within than there is between.
Yes.
Well, I was going to say, I think that I agree with Lori's point of like a diversity of thought and point of view is great. And I think that's one thing that's interesting is even within the band of sisters, the 6 of us, we have, huge diversity, just even between the 3 of us. I mean, I'm gay. They're kind of boring straight people.
Boring straight people. That's what you're saying under my name. Boring straight person.
Well, we got Christians, Jews. We got Lori has kids. Katie has step kids. I have no kids. I mean, it's just, I'm cool. They're not. I mean, they're just a diversity.
Well, that was apparent. You didn't need to say that last one, but okay.
See, when you have to say it out loud,
I know. You have to do a handstand. See. But one of our friends of Career Club is Johnny Taylor Jr., who's the CEO of SHRM, Society of Human Resources Management, right? Mm-hmm. And we were talking about this exact issue, and it was around, well, more broadly, diversity, which implies difference. And so, Lori, like, I'm way deep in your camp once, differences are good and to be celebrated, right? And Johnny is like, so be careful what you wish for, first of all, because when you get diversity, you get diversity. And not everybody falls in line and thinks the exact same way, particularly on hot button issues. Yes. Right. And so, my question for him was, so what's the solve on that? And I think you guys would agree with this, but it's around civility and respect. Yes. And Lori, I'm very deep in your camp on assume good intent.
Yes.
Right. Yes. And so we don't need to go on a huge trail of how, polemic, social conversation has gotten, but just the fact that if we find what unites us together, right? So if we work at a company, like, what's the mission of the company? Do we have a shared vision? We bought into the purpose of the company. Now, bringing different ways and understanding of different constituents that we might be serving, stakeholders, right, that we might be after. There you go, Matt. Thank you. Good job. Matt is a great guy, by the way. But the diversity, I often liken it to a quilt, right? And quilts are beautiful because there's all these patches of color and pattern and difference. And individually, they can be beautiful, but when they're brought together, it's this very unique work of art right, that we all love. And so, I'm glad to hear what you said, Lori, at least because it kind of aligns with what I think about the topic, but I do believe it's true. And I think if we looked at the highest performing companies, that's what we would find over time.
Yeah. The other thing, I just read an article recently on this, which was that unlike a mosaic like on a quilt, which is just sort of beautiful and calming to look at all the diversity of the patches, when you're operating in a diverse workplace, there's a natural sort of, I don't want to say tension there, but like to get to realize all the productivity from diversity, it means that you're not going to all see things the same way, right?
Yeah.
Gender diversity of style, background. So there's a little bit of natural conflict that comes from that, which can feel uneasy when you're not used to it. But it's actually getting through that conflict productively and debating the issues productively that gets you to a better run company. When we first started working, there was something that they said when you were going out on recruiting and you would say, well, how do I judge or whatever? And they literally said the Pittsburgh airport test, like if you got stuck in the airport with someone for 7 hours, pick somebody that you would want to spend time with, which is it's antithetical to diversity, right? Because that's how you get a lot of the like, oh, we went to Choate together. We were in Sigma Chi together. We were, went to Darien Country Club together. Like there's a lot of sort of sameness of people that are just like you, that it's easy to spend time with. And what you want is, again, all productively, but no, people challenge your assumptions. They help you see maybe where you have some underlying bias. That a little bit of that, kind of making things a little uncomfortable is what makes things better.
Exactly.
It's just harder. It's harder. So it's kind of natural that people veer towards easier, more comfortable paths. So you just have to recognize that it's going to be harder. You can't really sugarcoat that. It just is.
Yeah.
Well, let's do a little bit of a double click because, the book has got 30 something examples of these kinds of things that happen in the workplace. And I think I told you guys offline, like almost immediately when I was like, and I'm going to blame this a little bit on my Southernness, but talking about the girl in accounting, I would never talk about the boy in accounting, ever. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like okay, but it's true. And did I almost sent you guys an email this morning that started with "I'm sorry," which I thought was great. But maybe if we could pick on, and maybe we could do one each, or however you guys want to do this. But like a very common one, or even an insidious one, right? Yeah. And then why it matters, and then maybe how, from those three perspectives, if this is happening to you, if you're the boss, if you witness this. So, once again.
I'll start with actually you hit on one of my favorite chapters, which is who's the new girl, and it's this, we do use the word girl a lot. Have you met the new girl in accounting? We just hired a new girl out of Harvard, and again, you cannot say it the other way. I've actually, one of my techniques is I'll actually say like, hey, wait, Bob, just say the same sentence if it was John and not Susan you were talking about, and they try to say, oh, we just hired a new boy out of Harvard, and they just can't. They start laughing. So. And I think words matter, sets the tone. A lot of this language can be very minimizing. I think if male colleagues think of their female colleagues as girls, I hardly think of them, they're going to take them serious as a candidate for like this CEO slate. So I think it really sets the tone. And there's other, girl is one example. There's a lot of other gendered language. A lot of the male-leaning language is usually more positive. Man up, man power, gentleman's agreement, two guys in a garage talking about a startup. With women, it can be like, throw like a girl, Debbie Downer, diva, or, like, is this simple, when you're talking about innovation and you have a screen of like, is this simple enough that your mother can understand it, as though that's the lowest common denominator. So I think words and tone really make a difference. How you approach it, I think if you could spend a whole hour on this just topic alone, any of these. But for me, I would generally kind of address it right there in the meeting. If someone said something, I would do it in a jokey way. That would be my style. I think Lori would probably maybe go behind the scenes and say, hey, after the meeting, you might mention something and do it. That would be more her style, or maybe right up the point of emphasize when they say, have you met the new girl in accounting? Be like, oh, I have met the new woman in accounting. She's great. I heard she, and you kind of just try to maybe be a good role model there. I think for a boss or leader, definitely pay attention. You don't do it yourself. And if you hear other people do it, correct it the same way, whether maybe you're like, oh, actually the new woman that in accounting was blah, 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 or pull them aside. And if you're a witness, the same thing. I think the witnesses that's the one that's the most people are going to be witnesses. You're going to be in the room when these things happen. And I think, be a good role model, try to call it out, try to help, emphasize again, people, positive intent, people aren't trying to do this. And how do we help shape it?
Lori, what pops in your mind?
Yeah. So C's favorite is the one about girls. I have, there's a chapter that I like called Great Idea, Greg. And this scenario, just to set the stage, this is, you're in a meeting, assume you're a woman or, someone underrepresented, and you say something, and then 5 minutes later, usually, a white man will say the same thing, and they're like, great idea, Greg. And you just like, your head wants to explode, because you're like, I just literally said that. So that's the thought bubble in your head. But because it's work, not home, you can't stand up and go, I just literally said that. James, if that were the name of your husband, for example. So I think that we all have our sort of like, you have to have your behavior on at work. So in that particular situation, that great idea, Greg. And one of the things I would say about this by way of background is, I think we talked about this at the beginning, like one of the key things in inclusion and belonging is people feeling like they matter, that their voice is heard. I mean, at a really sort of a very high level. So think about this great idea, Greg. You're talking, you have ideas, and someone is just skipping right over you and then giving credit to somebody else 10 minutes later. So that's the background. In terms of what you do on that, so if it's you, so if you're the one that is talking and you feel like they've just skipped over you and then they say, great idea, Greg, you can do a couple of things. I mean, you can speak up. You can, if it isn't being heard, you can use the chat if you're on a Zoom, for example, right? But the other thing you can do is preempting. So remember, there's things you can do in the moment, but there's also preempting and what you can do after the fact. So this is one of these things that usually doesn't happen once. It usually happens over and over again. And so sometimes what you can do is you can go to allies before the meeting and say, hey, I would love it if you could have my back in the meeting. If you hear me saying something and it's not being heard, I would love it if you can help me. So sometimes you can preempt the issue. Sometimes you can be very surgical about where you sit. You can sit in the front. You can speak first. Sometimes when you're not being heard, I'll go up to the whiteboard and I'll just write something on the whiteboard. So there's a lot of things you can do if it's you. If you're an ally in the room, what I would encourage you to do is, ally of any gender, is amplify and give credit. So when Lori says something, Lori said something, no one says anything, right? And then 10 minutes later, Greg says it and they say, great idea, Greg. You can say, Greg, I love what you're saying. And I'd love to go back to, what Lori brought up a few minutes ago on that, right? So bring it back to what Lori did and amplify what Lori did. I wouldn't advise saying, Lori said that 10 minutes ago. Like, that's just not that productive, but there's a way that you can amplify. Thank you, Greg. And Lori, can you go back to what you started a few minutes ago? I would love for you to continue on that point that you were making about the new manufacturing facility in Des Moines. So again, what you can do as the woman, what you can do as a person in the room. And then I think if you're a boss, one piece of advice that I would give that goes across a lot of these scenarios is pay attention not just to the content of the meeting, but to the dynamics of the meeting. So pay attention to who's speaking, when they're speaking, who's getting credit. Bosses tend to focus a lot on the actual content. What are the financials? When are we going to open the new facility in Des Moines, et cetera? And that's very, very important. But I think bosses have to play, two games at once. So they have to be able to do that, and they have to be able to focus on the dynamics of the meeting.
So super quick, a few months ago, we had David Taylor, who's the retired CEO from Procter. And I love David Taylor. And that was really kind of one of the big lessons coming out of that chat was he really felt like a lot of his role was the dynamics in making sure that people were being heard. And then, not even being responsible for synthesizing all of it, because one of his expressions is none of us is better than all of us.
I love that.
Isn't that good? And but just really being cognizant of making sure that people are participating irrespective of level of the company, functional area that's less sexy or whatever it might be, or gender in this case, but really making sure that people felt like that they were being heard. Otherwise, people shut down. And it's like, well, why am I even here? Right?
Exactly.
Katie, what's a good example for you?
So one of the areas that we talk about, and we've actually got 2 chapters that kind of touch in this general area in the book, is around office housework and the kind of non-promotable or non-essential work that women tend to get. They get put in those roles. The easy ones to identify and I think call out are the, taking the notes, setting up parties, and any of that kind of office housework stuff. If you're continually being asked to do that, some of the ones that we've seen and heard more about during the pandemic is who sets up the next Zoom call. So it's these administrative tasks that just tend to go towards not just the lowest level person in the room, but tends to go towards the women. So that's one area. A related area, and possibly I think a more insidious and problematic area, is the this kind of culture work, the good, we call this good soldier type work, and that is women, and this is happening a lot to people of color in organizations these days, is being put on these culture task forces. Like, we want to make sure that we are as inclusive as possible, so we need you to take 25% of your week now and help us do it better. And I mean, it's all fine, and actually this is more data that comes out in the McKinsey study as well, that this is, and it takes a lot of time. It can be very good for the company, right? It has very good results for the company. But then if you're not rewarded for it and you're not promoted for it, or it's considered non-promotable work, there we go again, right? It's just kind of another little off-ramp. And that's just, it's something that women, allies, and leaders all need to be aware of. For women, so if it's you, I mean, I can remember, being in meetings where it just would drive me crazy. Like, the women would stay and clean up after lunch. And I just steeled myself to walk out. I mean, I felt like a jerk, but I walked out because the guys were walking out. Now, I took care of my own trash, but like, I refused to perpetuate that idea that the women are going to stay back and do. So that's the more housekeeping type thing. When it's, you're asked to be on a culture task force, you're asked to run the United Way or something like that, there's a little bit more of sometimes it's the right thing to do. Other times you can say things like, gee, I would love to be on that. I'm already on this one and that one. And I've got, these 3 other projects that have the time sensitivity. Can I take some of the pressure off one of those timelines? And so it's kind of a more gentle way of managing your workload and helping somebody get you to a decision where it happens to somebody else. So that's one thing, is different ways to say no and how directly you can do that. I think for leaders, you really have to look at who you are volunteering, or as Lori likes to say, voluntolding, to do things, and make sure that you are not putting, your 5 favorite guys on the M&A task force, and you're putting women on the, kind of culture and party task forces. You have to be really careful with that. And allies, this is a little bit trickier for an ally maybe, but you can volunteer. You can be like, you could look around and say, gosh, Cie's had to do the United Way drive the last 3 years. I've never been asked to do it. I'm gonna step up and volunteer to do it this year, or point something out. But there are things that everybody can do there. And I mean, worst case or best case, I guess, is you decide that, okay, if this is an important enough thing, like the M&A task force, I'm going to put it on your review as a deliverable. And if you hit it out of the park, then you're going to get credit for it. And you're going to get promoted because of it. So if you get that, to me, it needs to be seen as valuable work if you're going to be putting your time into it.
Yeah, the phrase that popped in my head as you were describing that, Katie, it's a career tax.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah,
Right?
that's a good one.
Yeah, because if you're being asked to do this stuff and it's not measurable, compensatable, rewardable, promotable, then basically it's a tax.
Yeah.
And I've still got to get all my other crap done. And oh, by the way, I'm going to probably get promoted on performance. And you guys just laid this 25% time commitment.
Yeah.
On.
So
when am I supposed to get all this done?
it's more compounding, right? Of the same basic thing. Yeah.
Exactly. So I wanted to test something, see if you guys would agree with this. And then I'm going to get to my last question here in a sec. But as I kind of took in, everything, and again, highly recommend, this is awesome, is 3 words that just really kind of came to me as sort of, if I had to put a wrapper around all of this, was empathy, respect, and trust.
Oh, those are good ones.
Because the empathy is like, well, how would that feel if somebody asked me or said that to me, or y'all talk about counting the room. I actually count the room a lot in reverse.
Good.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm very, and I have been for a long time. That's something that comes natural to me. I'm like, oh, wow, I bet she probably feels kind of weird, or he feels kind of weird as the only person of color in this meeting or whatever, and trying to make people feel included.
Yeah.
So that's an easy one for me. Respect. I mean, that gets back to word choice, C, that you talked about. I'd never thought of the concept, Katie, of office housework before. And as soon as I read it, I'm like, oh my gosh, yes. Hey, can you get the bagels and the coffee? Who's going to take the notes? Cleaning up afterwards, like all that stuff. As soon as I read, I'm like, oh my gosh, like I can completely think of 1,000 examples of where that's true, right? But it's very disrespectful at the same time, right? Because I'm too important. I'm going to go off and do my thing, and you can go do that. But ultimately, I think that it comes down to trust, right? And so, kind of just on the, good old boys network and all that stuff. It's like, well, it's just easier for me to trust somebody who's more like me, right? And if I don't put the effort forward to try and understand, show a level of respect, assume good intent, blah, 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 then it's like, well, then I'm going to go to my easier default behavior and just go to somebody who's more like me.
Yeah.
Is that fair?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway.
And look at it. The higher up you get, the more people like you there are around you. It actually gets reinforced as you move up.
Exactly. And so let's use this, because I told you all from the very beginning, the main reason I wanted to have you guys on, was for my daughter. So Christina's 32. She's got her MBA. She's, works a very, important job at her company and has a lot of responsibility. And just as a father, like, it drives me insane to think that, like, she's, on the receiving end of this kind of stuff. Right. And I'm not going to say things that I know to be true, but would be very in line with what we're talking about. Worse. But since she's, on a trail that you guys, have been on in some ways not too long ago, what's the best advice that you would give Christina to not just survive, but to thrive in her career, and women like Christina?
I'll start. I think one thing I would tell Christina, as well as my younger self, is kind of the importance of building relationships and in kind of informal ways, and how far that goes, which I think men happens much more naturally, whether it's in the locker room or playing basketball or golf or going out to dinner, having drinks or talk before the meeting. And I think in some cases, women are not necessarily as easily included in that. In some cases, they're not golfing or not as often. They might not be going out and having drinks or whatever. But there even could be like, hey, in the pre-conversation before the meeting starts. I mean, there's all these different times that you could kind of be involved. I think initially, if I wasn't included in some of that stuff, naturally, I'd put my head down and be like, well, I'm just going to get through 3 more emails and do 2 more texts. And I was thought I'm going to be productive while these guys are not being productive. And I think in the long run, I would have been way more productive. I would have been better off building relationships and trust such that I was being put on the task force and naturally being picked and whatever. And I think that women don't put as much emphasis on that, of how important it is building these relationships and trust and conversations that will pay dividends throughout their careers. So I did it, but I feel like I could have done it sooner.
Mm-hmm. Katie?
So, I remember sitting at an intern lunch when I was probably just a little bit younger than your daughter is now. And Roger Enrico was running Frito-Lay at the time. And he said, and I think I've paraphrased it really poorly over the years, but this is how I remember it now. And this is actually not even specific to women. I think it's really good career advice that, when he, and it was getting at his trajectory, he had taken himself off the beaten path. But when he came back, he didn't do what you were supposed to do in those days, to what was the next most, the place to be, the assignment to have, the thing to do to advance. He went a different path. And he said, as long as you're doing something that is, growing you're interested in your learning and you're moving ahead, you stay. The minute any one of those things starts to go away, you leave. And it was in response to a question about, kind of like career path and career trajectory and things like that. And I thought it was super useful because, it was, and even in my own career, it was going on small assignments and small brands where I could make an impact, not looking for the big, kind of the big showy job that sounded good, but was in reality not the best place to be. And then, kind of fulfilling your own personal interests and curiosity. So I thought that was really, really useful advice. I think that it requires I also think there's a little bit of patience. You want to do the job that you're doing really well and not worry about the next job. But I think with women, you have to be careful about having too much patience. So there's that in-between thing, right? You don't, and I think for men and women, you don't want to be the person who's never content where they are, but at the same time, so there's a judgment there. And I think, for women, err a little bit maybe on impatience and get to a place that values you and moves you and gives you things that are curious. And a big part of that, and we talk about it in the book, and I think we can all credit, is making sure you've got a sponsor. So that's all wrapped up in there. And, but I think that's can be the most important and critical thing to make sure that you're valued and moving.
Yeah. So 2 things that just sort of strike me. One is it's amazing in the career conversations, because obviously Career Club, that's what we're talking about a lot, is curiosity. That is probably the number one trait that continues to bubble up, is you have to have a natural curiosity and go exhibit that curiosity. So that's cool. The sponsor, that's such a great suggestion, Katie, because part of what implies that, or is implied in that for me, is the trust. It's like, hey, I trust this person.
Yeah.
And I'm going to mentor him or her, right? I'm going to advocate on their behalf. So I'm going to put my brand on this person. Yeah. And that's what a brand is trust. Right.
And that gets to potential, right? Because then the sponsor is more willing to promote based on potential than performance. And I think that ties back to what Cie was saying as well, of putting yourself in that position, getting yourself noticed, because that is a requirement of being sponsored. Unfortunately, you can't go ask someone to be your sponsor. You have to get sponsored. And that requires a level of partly luck, but also just making sure that your work is important and noticed.
Exactly. Lori, what advice would you give Christina?
So mine would be around the area of really like understanding your strengths and really figuring out how to play on your strengths. So we've been very fortunate. We've worked for wonderful companies, did a lot of leadership training, but part of the downside of that is you spend a lot of time doing development feedback and talking about your development needs. And what I try and get people to work on, and I wish I knew this earlier, is take your development needs and get them to standard. Don't spend a second of time trying to make your development needs strengths. Like, it's just not a good use of your time, right? Make sure they're not getting in the way. So again, get them to standard, and then really focus on understanding, if you've ever done strength finders or something like that, look at your strengths. What would they look like if they were towering strengths? What are your superpowers? What would it look like, something that's a superpower for you? What would it look like if you were the best in the world at that? And how could you use that to your advantage in your chosen career? I think we spend too much time and too much airtime focusing on people's development needs or weaknesses. And I really wish I had spent less airtime, less mind time worrying about that, and just being able to say, oh, here's the development need that I'm working on, boom, get it to standard, and then really spend airtime, energy, effort focusing on my strengths.
Well, I appreciate you saying that. It's ironic because we've incorporated strength finders into our process with all of our clients. Because my observation is people tend to be not sufficiently self-aware of what their strengths are. And even to the extent they are, they often lack the vocabulary to advocate for themselves, right, of what their strengths are, right? Yes. And then, if you think about what's a team, not everybody plays the same role on a team, right? So I'm the big dude that can block people. I'm the guy that can throw the ball 50 yards down the field. Great. We have different strengths. Let's go play to those strengths. So that's cool. Yeah. Super quick, because I want to respect Lindsay's question here. Does the book get into any of the details about how to read the room and the dynamics of a meeting?
Yeah, I don't know if we go into a lot of specifics about how to do it. We certainly talk about that pre-meeting, the pre-meeting chit chat, the understanding the three parts of a meeting, the pre, the during, and the post, and also the importance of understanding the power networks in your company, and where and how decisions really get made. Yep. But it's, that's to the best of my knowledge, where we hit it.
Yeah. Okay. And it really differs dramatically by company, right? Yeah. In some companies, like, they break a lot of eggs in the meeting. They have really robust conversations. Some companies are very like, all the decisions happen before and after, and the meetings are very symbolic. So you have to understand how the culture, which is what's unwritten, how things actually happen in your company. Yeah.
Cool. Well, to your earlier point, Katie, we could talk 7 hours just on that stuff. So this has been phenomenal. I mean, we can, like, Heather, this conversation is so important. Thank you so much for taking the time to share your knowledge and experiences. Like, people want to feel valued and appreciated. That's what Heather's saying. And by the way, she works with us at Career Club. So, so I'm glad she feels that way. And Sarah Kirby, good to see you. Thank you. So on the screen here is the cover of the book, You Should Smile More, as well as a QR code that'll take you right to Amazon to be able to buy it. Highly recommend it. It was a real eye-opener for me. I probably need to reread it, honestly, to kind of fully synthesize a lot of these things and internalize them. But I just so much appreciate you guys being on today. Thank you so much. And like I said, a big part of this was for my daughter. So really, really appreciate everything that you guys had to share, not just for me, but for her.
Awesome. Thank you, Matt.
Okay. Bless you guys. Thanks so much. Everybody has a great rest of your week, and we'll see you next week. Thank you all.
Thank you.